my son lay in the ICU fighting for his life, his wife was 400 miles away at a spa resort posting selfies with a glass of rosé. Room 211 at Mercy General, Portland. The ventilator breathes for him at a rate I'd memorized without trying. 16 cycles per minute. I've been counting for 9 days. My son, 34 years old, a high school history teacher who coached junior varsity baseball on weekends, was hit by a drunk driver on the ICO-5 on a Tuesday evening. The impact fractured 3 ribs, collapsed his left lung, and caused what the neurologist called significant traumatic brain injury with uncertain prognosis. His wife, my daughter-in-law, flew to Portland the first night. Stayed 36 hours. Then left to take care of things at home. That was 8 days ago. The spa photos started appearing on her Instagram 4 days later. Scottsdale, Arizona. Turquoise pool. Number healing. Number healing. Number self-care. I'm 58 years old, retired after 26 years with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I know what financial crimes look like from 100 different angles. More importantly, I know what people look like when they're calculating rather than grieving. The charge nurse, a woman named Peggy, who has worked this floor for 19 years and wears the same sensible shoes every shift, stops me in the hallway at 10:40 one night. She looks both ways before she speaks. "Mr. Calloway," she says, quiet enough that only I can hear. "There's something I need to show you, and I want you to understand. I've never done anything like this in my career." Her hands are steady when she shows me the tablet, but her jaw is tight. The document on the screen is a medical power of attorney filed 2 days after my son was admitted. It names my daughter-in-law as sole medical decision-maker and explicitly excludes all other family members from receiving information about his condition, including me. "This was filed while you were sitting in the waiting room," Peggy says. She drove straight from this hospital to an attorney's office. We found out because the attorney's office faxed it. I look at the timestamp, 2:14 p.m. My son had been in surgery for 11 hours at that point. "There's more," Peggy says. She doesn't want to tell me. I can see that. But she's telling me anyway. She called the insurance coordinator yesterday, twice. She wanted to know about accelerated death benefits. I drive home that night and don't sleep. In 26 years of investigating tax fraud, insurance schemes, and financial crimes, I have interviewed people who were guilty of things that would make most people's hair go white. I know what premeditation looks like. I know the difference between someone who is afraid of losing a spouse and someone who is managing a situation. At 6 a.m., I call my old colleague, a woman I worked with for 12 years at the IRS before she went private. Her name is Faye Drummond. She runs a financial forensics consulting firm in Seattle now. She answers on the second ring, which tells me she's already been up for a while. "Faye," I say, "I need you to pull everything you can find on my daughter-in-law. Accounts, transactions, property records, anything with her name on it." A pause. "How bad?" "I don't know yet." "That's what I'm trying to find out." "What's the timeline?" I think about the spa photos, the rosé, the hashtags, yesterday. She tells me she needs 48 hours. I ask for 24. She sighs the way she used to sigh when I gave her impossible deadlines at the agency, and then she says, "I'll call you by tomorrow morning." I spend the rest of the day at the hospital. I read to my son from a paperback copy of Lonesome Dove that I've been carrying since the second day. He always loved that book. He made me read it when he was 17 and then argued with me about it for a month. I tell him about the argument now, sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. His grip is warm. Inconsistent, but warm. At 8 p.m., his wife calls. She doesn't ask how he's doing. She asks if there have been any changes in his status. The phrasing is clinical. It doesn't belong to a woman who is scared for her husband. It belongs to someone waiting for news that will trigger the next step in a plan. "He's stable," I tell her. "When are you coming back?" "I'm managing a lot of things from here," she says. "It's complicated." "He's your husband." She says she's doing everything she can. She says it without any weight in her voice. The next morning, Faye calls at 7:18 a.m. You need to sit down, she says. My son's life insurance policy, $1.8 million, taken out 22 months ago. His wife is the sole beneficiary. In the past 8 months, she has made an average of 1 call per month to the insurance company to confirm coverage details. The most recent call was 6 days ago, the day before the spa post started. There's a problem with the policy application, though, Faye says. The medical history disclosure. Your son listed no significant health conditions, which is accurate. But the attending physician's signature on the supplemental form, I cross-referenced the license number. The doctor whose number is listed retired from practice in 2019, 5 years before the form was signed. A forged document on a life insurance application. Federal crime. Keep going, I say. The joint checking account has been drained systematically over the past 7 months. 14 separate withdrawals, none exceeding $9,000. A pattern any former IRS agent would recognize immediately. Structuring transactions to stay below the $10,000 federal reporting threshold. Total withdrawn, $73,400. There's a separate account in her name only at a different bank that received 17 deposits during the same period. 17 deposits that correspond to the 14 withdrawals with slight date offsets. She's been moving money, Faye says, and whoever advised her on the structuring knew what they were doing. But they made one mistake. What mistake? The IP addresses used to authorize the transfers. 3 of them trace back to a hotel in Scottsdale. The same hotel where she's currently registered. She wasn't just celebrating at that spa. She was managing the financial cleanup from there. I call my attorney, a man I've known since our kids went to middle school together. His name is Alton Marsh, and he handles estate law mostly, but he spent 10 years in criminal defense before that, and he thinks like a strategist. Alton, I say, I need to file an emergency petition for medical guardianship, and I need it done today. I tell him everything. When I finish, the line is quiet for a moment. You have documentation for all of this? I have a forensic accountant with a 22-page preliminary report. Okay, Alton says. Give me 2 hours. That afternoon, at 2:30, my daughter-in-law calls again. This time, her voice is different. Tighter. I get a call from the hospital, she says. They told me someone is contesting my medical power of attorney. That's right, I say. You can't do that. That document is legal. It's under review. There are questions about the circumstances under which it was filed. A pause. When she speaks again, there's an edge under the smoothness. You're making a mistake. I'm his wife. I have rights. You do, I say, and so does he. What does that mean? It means he is my son, and he is still alive, and the people who love him are not going to stand still while someone treats his life like a financial instrument. The silence that follows is long enough that I wonder if she's hung up. I don't know what you think you know, she finally says, but you should be very careful. My attorney is already involved. I'm sure he is, I say. So is mine. And so is a forensic accountant. And so, as of about 40 minutes ago, is the Oregon Department of Financial Regulation. She hangs up without another word. What she doesn't know is that Peggy has already spoken to 2 other nurses on the floor. Quietly, carefully, and that those nurses have each come to me separately in the past 24 hours, with things they've been watching and not knowing what to do with. One of them tells me my daughter-in-law called the floor station 3 days ago asking if there was any way to determine how long the current prognosis might continue. Not whether he'd improve, how long the current state, the unconscious state might last. The other nurse, a young man who's been on the unit for 2 years, tells me something that makes the room feel like it's tilted. The night before Nurse Peggy talked to you, he says, Dr. Hennessy, not your son's attending. A different doctor, someone I hadn't seen on this floor before. He came in during the 2 a.m. shift. He went directly to room 211. He wasn't on the schedule. When I asked who authorized the visit, he said your daughter-in-law had requested a second opinion. What did he do? He looked at the chart for about 3 minutes. Then he asked if we had the patient's DNR on file. I know the answer before I ask it. Did we? No, but he seemed to expect that we did. I call Alton at midnight. He's awake. I tell him about the unscheduled doctor. I tell him to add it to the petition. The financial investigation takes on the second track the following day. Faya spent the night pulling records she shouldn't technically have access to yet, but she has friends from 20 years at the agency, and she knows how to ask the right questions. She calls me at 8 a.m. The insurance policy has a double indemnity clause, she says. Accidental death, instead of 1.8, it pays 3.6 million. The accident that put my son in this hospital. A drunk driver who ran a red light. Officially an accident. Faye's voice goes careful. I'm not making an accusation. But I pulled the accident report. The other driver had his license suspended 18 months ago for a prior DUI. He drives a 2019 pickup, and his registration is current, which means someone has been paying his insurance and registration fees because he hasn't had steady employment in 2 years. Who? I don't have that yet, but I will. I go back to my son's room and sit with him for a long time. Outside, Portland is gray and cool. The kind of October afternoon that smells like rain coming. My son used to love this kind of weather. We used to go to the coast this time of year. When he was a boy, just the two of us, we'd rent a cabin with bad plumbing and cook chili on a 2-burner stove and play cards for hours. He always let me win at the end of the night. Thought I didn't notice. I noticed. I hold his hand and I tell him I'm working on it. His heart rate stays steady. Faye calls again at noon. The driver of the pickup truck, in the 18 months since his license was suspended, 2 payments had been made for his car registration and insurance renewal. Both payments were made by electronic check from an account belonging to my daughter-in-law's sister. My daughter-in-law has a sister who lives in Gresham, 20 minutes from the intersection where my son was hit. I call Alton. He calls his contact at the Multnomah County DA's office. The DA's office calls Portland PD. By 4 p.m., the traffic accident has been reclassified as an open investigation. What I don't know yet, what I'll find out later from the detective who calls me at 7:30 that evening, is that the driver of the pickup had 7 phone calls with my daughter-in-law's cell number in the 2 weeks before the accident. The last call was 40 minutes before my son left school that Tuesday evening. They had timed it. The emergency guardianship hearing is held in Multnomah County Circuit Court. The gallery is full in a way that courtrooms usually aren't for civil matters. Alton told me later it was because word had gotten out to the hospital staff. Peggy was there in the second row. The young night shift nurse, 2 other women from the ICU floor who came on their day off. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, moves through the evidence methodically. The financial records Faye assembled. The insurance inquiry logs, the phone records from the pickup driver, the testimony from the hospital staff about the unauthorized doctor's visit, and the question about the DNR. My daughter-in-law's attorney argues that I have a hostile relationship with his client, that I've been interfering with her legal rights as a spouse, that my son would not want this. He argues it without much conviction. He knows what's in the evidence binders. Alton calls Peggy to testify. 19 years on the same unit. She sits in the witness chair with the same steadiness she has when she's working a 14-hour shift. She describes the night she showed me the power of attorney document. She describes the insurance call. She describes the way my daughter-in-law spoke when she called the nurse's station, asking about prognosis timelines in a way that did not sound like someone who is hoping for recovery. The opposing attorney tries to push back. Peggy doesn't move. In 19 years, Alton asks her, have you ever reported a family member's behavior to a patient's next of kin before? No, she says. I've never had to. The judge grants emergency medical guardianship. Full control of medical decisions transferred to me, effective immediately. All of my daughter-in-law's access to my son's financial accounts frozen pending criminal investigation. Her rights as medical proxy revoked. When the gavel comes down, my daughter-in-law stands and walks out without looking at anyone. Outside the courtroom, 2 detectives are waiting for her in the hallway. They arrest her on conspiracy charges, insurance fraud, wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder based on the phone records and the payments to the driver. The driver has already taken a cooperation agreement. He gave them everything within 12 hours of being re-interviewed. The news cycle picks it up by evening. The story leads at 6 p.m. on 3 Portland stations. A high school teacher in a coma while his wife allegedly orchestrated the accident that put him there. The Instagram posts run side by side with his hospital photo, the selfies from the Scottsdale pool, the rosé, the sunset, the hashtag, and then the still image from the hospital security system of her walking away from the attorney's office the afternoon my son was still in surgery. My phone doesn't stop for 2 days. I don't answer most of them. I am at the hospital. 61 days after the accident, my son opens his eyes. Not the way it happens in movies, all at once, clean and dramatic. It starts with his fingers, a real grip, instead of the reflexive response I'd been reading into for weeks. Then his eyes, tracking towards sound. The speech pathologist is in the room when he first forms a word. It's barely sound, but I know what it is. He says, "Dad." I have been a lot of things in my life. Revenue agent, team leader, division supervisor. I've closed cases worth tens of millions. I've testified in federal court. I've done work I'm proud of, and work I'd rather not talk about. And I've kept my head level through most of it. I am not level when my son says Dad. His recovery is slower than I want, and faster than the doctors predicted. 8 weeks of inpatient rehab, physical therapy, speech therapy, the frustrating and patient work of rebuilding pathways in the brain. He has gaps. There are things from before the accident that he reaches for and can't find, but the curiosity comes back. The humor comes back. The way he looks at things sideways before he decides what he thinks. That comes back first, actually, before some of the words do. The criminal case moves on its own schedule. My daughter-in-law is denied bail on a conspiracy to commit murder charge. Her sister takes a plea deal. The driver gets 6 years on a reduced charge for his cooperation. The trial, when it comes, takes 11 days. The jury deliberates for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing judge, a man about my age, who I notice takes his time reading through the pre-sentencing report, gives my daughter-in-law 22 years without possibility of parole. Alton handles the civil recovery, the frozen accounts, the reverse transfers, the insurance policy, which the company voids due to the fraudulent application, meaning the forged physician's signature is the thread that unravels the whole arrangement. The structured withdrawals are recovered almost entirely. By the time the civil proceedings conclude, my son's financial accounts are whole. His house is his. His retirement account is his. His baseball trophies are still on the shelf in the garage, where she apparently never bothered to move them. The last week of February, my son and I drive to the coast. We rent a cabin in Cannon Beach, small place, bad shower pressure, 2-burner stove. We cook chili the way we used to. We play cards. The wind comes off the Pacific hard and cold and the windows rattle all night. He wins every hand. I don't say anything about it. He catches me smiling anyway. "You always knew," he says. "Always," I say. Outside, the ocean does what it does. Patient, indifferent, enormous. The kind of thing that puts everything else in proportion. Some people mistake patience for weakness. They think that because a man is quiet, because he doesn't raise his voice, because he builds his case slowly and carefully before he acts, they think that means he won't act. That's the last mistake they make. I think about those 61 days a lot. Not the courtroom, not the arrest, not the verdict. Those are the parts that make a clean story. What I keep coming back to is the drive home from the hospital on the 9th night, when I had nothing yet. No proof, just the charge nurses shaking hands in a document filed at 2014 in the afternoon, and a feeling I've spent 26 years learning to trust. People ask me sometimes what the work taught me. 26 years tracking financial crimes, following money through false identities and layered accounts and forged signatures. What did it teach me? It taught me that most people who do wrong things are not that different from people who don't. They get tired. They get greedy. They make small decisions that feel manageable, and then one day they're standing in an airport trying to board a flight to Dubai with a laptop full of their own confessions. What stopped my daughter-in-law wasn't me. Not really. It was the accumulation of her own choices. Every transaction she structured to stay under $10,000 left a timestamp. Every phone call she made from that hotel in Scottsdale left an IP address. She thought she was being careful. She was being meticulous about the wrong things. She covered the money and forgot about the metadata. She planned for his death and didn't plan for Peggy. Peggy. 19 years on the same floor, same sensible shoes, the same steadiness I'd watch her carry through a 14-hour shift. She didn't come to me because she had evidence. She came to me because she'd been watching long enough to know the difference between a wife who is afraid and a wife who is waiting. That's not a skill you learn in a classroom. That's what happens when you show up, day after day, and pay attention to people. That's character. The kind you can't fake and can't manufacture and can't buy at $430 a plate at a restaurant in Scottsdale. My son is the same way. He always let me win at cards when he was a boy. Thought I didn't notice. What kind of kid does that? A kid who'd rather his father feel good than win himself? A kid who grows up to teach history to 15-year-olds because he actually believes that understanding the past matters. The accident was supposed to end him. It didn't, because some things in a person are deeper than the damage. That's what I want people to take from this, if they take anything. Not the investigation. Not the forensic accounting, or the cooperation agreements, or the 22 years without parole. Those are consequences. What I want people to think about is what made those consequences possible. Peggy's willingness to risk her career for a stranger's father. Faye working through the night on records she didn't have to pull. Alton answering your call at midnight and filing a petition by morning. All of them acting not because it was easy or safe, but because it was right. I've watched a lot of people in my life choose the easier thing. I understand it. The easier thing is usually survivable, but there is a quality in the people who matter most to me. In my son, in Peggy, in the people who showed up when my family needed them. A quality that doesn't fold when the situation gets hard. It stays. It works. It waits. My son won every hand of cards that last night in Cannon Beach. He didn't try to hide it this time. I didn't say anything. I just watched him shuffle the deck and deal again, and I thought, that's enough. That right there is enough.